The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone. Good day and welcome to the Genesis Zone show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this beautiful Thursday. Have you ever struggled with low energy? If you're a normal human being, there's a good possibility that you have. I mean, after all, we have to recharge our batteries, right? We're not these infinite energy beings. But what actually interferes with our batteries recharging? And better still, what can we do about it? This is what we'll be talking about in today's show, so stay tuned. All right, before I say what I'm about to say, I don't want any hate mail. None of us likes to be reminded of our age, but I'm just the messenger. So just in case you weren't aware of this, researchers have actually found that healthy preteens have low levels of fatigue with physical exertion when compared to average adults. And to everyone's surprise, they held their own when compared to endurance athletes. In fact, you see preteens apparently have nearly the exact same low levels of fatigue and the same fatigue recovery rates, the rapid recovery rates, as seasoned endurance athletes. Okay, maybe I was a little bit dramatic with the hate mail thing at the beginning, but none of us likes to be reminded that we aren't preteens anymore with all that energy and rapid recovery times. And I mean, my gosh, to be a teenager again, what would that be like? And just have the knowledge, but to have now. But I digress. So let's break this down. I know I'm taking some liberties here with this particular study, but when we look at this new study, it may be safe to conclude that age and activity level, i.e. the endurance athlete, plays a key role in your energy output throughout your day and throughout your life. The likelihood of having low energy and ability to recover with physical exertion. So age and activity level probably had something to do with your energy output, likelihood of having low energy, and this ability to recover quicker. But I have to take this this conclusion one step further. What if the endurance athletes and the preteens had genes that were simply functioning at more optimal levels? And I think research is actually starting to show that. Allow me to explain. Imagine for a moment that when it comes to your energy related genes, that there are some bad gene switches. Think of them like a light switch on the wall. There's some bad gene switches and some good gene switches. Now, some of the bad switches related to energy are turned on, meaning they're working against us, and some of the good gene switches are turned off. Now, our goal is to facilitate the good switches to be turned on and the bad switches to be turned off. Now, I personally believe that when we're born, our genetic switches are mostly turned in the correct position. But in time, events in our life, circumstances in our life, our thinking patterns even, I've got a previous podcast episode that shows our thinking patterns affect us. Our sleep, exercise, our eating habits, whether good or bad, can cause those switches to turn in the incorrect position. So that good gene switches, in essence, are turned off and the bad ones are turned on. Now, this brings me to my first study for the day and the first root cause for low energy, and that's epigenetics. Now, researchers at the University of Queensland have found that people who have higher genetic risk of clinical depression are more likely to have low energy, fatigue, chronic pain, and migraine headaches. This was no small study either. They looked at the genetics and the genetic markers of 15,000 volunteers, and they were able to associate the genetic markers that accompany depression that we've seen from previous studies related to depression were also correlated to and similar to or triggering the ones that are related to low energy. So there's this correlation there between these depression genetics and these low energy genetics that was brought out in the study. But that's not the only study related to epigenetics and low energy. Before I share these next studies, allow me to preface them by saying that there is a crippling condition called chronic fatigue syndrome. Some of you may be familiar with that. This disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, is far more difficult to explain than just simply saying it's only isolated to epigenetics. In fact, research is showing that chronic fatigue syndrome is a very complex disorder, similar to fibromyalgia, that we don't quite understand, but has very, very strong, but both of those are starting to show they have very, very strong epigenetic roots. And in recent years, genetic specialists have been drawing links between low energy, fatigue, and a person's genetic landscape when it comes to chronic fatigue syndrome. So with this being said, I think it's really prudent to look at the research from the field of epigenetics as it relates to chronic fatigue syndrome, because I think there's a gold mine of information there for us related to people that don't have chronic fatigue syndrome, but simply have low energy. And quite frankly, when I looked at the studies that are related to chronic fatigue syndrome, there are a lot of genes that are associated with low energy and fatigue that I've never heard of. And I've been doing this epigenetic thing for a long time. In fact, when I looked for studies specifically about those particular those gene SNPs that were new to me, I couldn't find any information on them. So that's how new they are. And that tells you how new they are to scientists as well. We don't really understand what it is that they do other than the fact that they are associated with low energy and fatigue. And in this particular case, associated with chronic fatigue syndrome. So here's what needs to be done. Research needs to be conducted to see if these same genes show up for low energy states without the presence of a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. My hunch is that in time, we will see these connections, these similarities, that somebody that has just low energy, they don't have a diagnosis of chronic fatigue, but they just struggle with low energy all the time, they're still able to function, whereas a chronic fatigue client really doesn't function well in the real world. A lot of times they're bedridden, they just can't get up and go, they can't do. There's a big difference between somebody that has low energy, somebody that has chronic fatigue, is what I'm trying to say. But I think in time, what we're going to see is some really strong epigenetic roots and some similarities between these two conditions. Sure, there's going to be some differences because one is a lot more severe than the other. And quite frankly, I think it has to do with inflammation. I think chronic fatigue sufferer has a lot more inflammation than somebody who doesn't have chronic fatigue, but they just have low energy. That's just Brian Brown's assessment on that. So now there are more causes for fatigue than just epigenetics. You know me, you know I talk about epigenetics all the time. But there are more root causes other than epigenetics. And unless you've been hiding under a rock the past couple of years, you are keenly aware that a certain virus has wreaked havoc all over the world. Now, a very recent study related to this Cupid virus, and that's what I'm kind of calling it to keep it off the radar screen of any bots that are scanning our material out there. A very recent study related to the Cupid virus showed that over the long term, 32% of people who've had the Cupid virus struggle with, guess what? Low energy and fatigue. Another study reviewed 66 other studies and found that low energy was the third most common complaint with folks long term who had the virus. The only other two symptoms that superseded low energy were anxiety and depression. Now, long before this pandemic and the rise of the Cupid virus, I've always been diligent about screening my clients for certain virus markers in their body. Um, and 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 I do this because we know that there are certain viruses that never really die. They just go dormant in the body. And in reality, they're sitting there, not completely dormant, not completely asleep, and they're just doing what I call simmering. They're just it's a low brew. It's just a low simmering. And because of the simmering effect, they cause a lot of inflammation. And that inflammation leads to a lot of damage in various organ systems throughout the body, which is not a good thing, in case you're wondering. And so, for instance, this one particular virus family, and I'm going to talk to you here about in a second, is notorious and has been linked to conditions like MS, been linked to conditions like lupus, has been linked to conditions like type 1 diabetes, has been linked to lymphomas. And there's just it's crazy because when the immune system doesn't function like it's supposed to, and you have to think of it in relationship to these viruses, the immune system should be healthy enough to keep these viruses suppressed. Because remember, they're just quote unquote dormant. They're still there. They're not completely dead. They're in lower numbers, but they're just they're sitting there in that simmering phase. And as long as we've got a healthy immune system to keep them suppressed, they don't do much damage. They don't cause a lot of inflammation. But as our immune system weakens, those viruses come out to play, and they don't play nicely, if I can add that. Now, the particular virus family that I'm speaking of is the Herpes viridae family. You don't need to get caught up on that. And everybody freaks out with the word herpes, but it's just a classification of viruses, like the viruses that cause cold sores and fever blisters, the virus that causes chickenpox, mono, shingles, and yes, sexually transmitted diseases as well. They're all in the herpes viridae family, but they're all just a little bit different. But the similarity that they do have is that they're wicked in that they go dormant. They never really die. And they tend to rear their ugly little heads under periods of extreme stress. So you'll hear, let me give you an example. You'll hear examples like this all the time. So you have to have chicken pox in your past history, your past medical history, in order to have shingles. It's caused by herpes zoster, the herpes zoster virus. So chicken pox goes away, quote unquote, but it doesn't really go away. It just goes dormant. Well, guess where it goes dormant? It goes dormant on the nerve roots of your nerves throughout your entire body. So under periods of stress, it can come back out. So you'll hear this is really common. A lady, a man, they lose their partner, their long-term partner. They're grieving. And when we grieve, we know grief can tear down the immune system. Well, when the immune system gets broken down, the next thing you hear is just like, oh my God, that poor soul, they've got this horrible case of shingles. And they just lost their husband or their wife like 3 weeks ago. That happens all the time. Or you'll hear somebody, oh my gosh, they were in a car accident, and that physical stress of being in that car accident, breaking down their immune system, allows them to develop mono, or excuse me, shingles. And they end up with shingles. The same thing can occur with mono. If you've never had it before, your immune system gets broken down because of a stress, a physical stress or an emotional stress, and boom, the next thing you know, you've got mono, and that can happen as well. If you look at fever blisters and cold sores, this is so common. We'll see when I'm taking a history on somebody, especially if they're a college student or a high school student, you'll ask them, how do you do around times like exams, midterm exams and final exams at the end of the year? And they say, oh man, that's when I always have cold sores. Well, guess what? It's because they're under stress and their immune system is broken down. So the crux of the matter is here, when the immune system breaks down, so these viruses come out and play, and they don't play nicely. And this stress, it's actually a breakdown of the immune system, which leads to a lot of inflammation and which perpetuates the further breakdown of the immune system. It's this wicked little vicious circle that occurs. But anyway, I hope you understand the importance of some viruses. Now, let's get back to the Cupid virus. The Cupid virus is really interesting. Um, and I'll be honest with you, it's way too early for us to judge yet what the long-term consequences of this virus are going to be. But I personally see characteristics with the Cupid virus that are very similar to these herpes viruses that we've dealt with for years. And the research is already starting to show that with the Cupid virus, we're also dealing with a breakdown in the immune function long term. And I mean, we've only had it 2 years out, 2 years, but we're starting to see people struggle with immunity, and we're starting to see people struggle with a lot of inflammatory issues. And these immune and inflammatory systems are definitely affected by this virus. Now, ultimately, time will tell. And I know that sounds really, really passive. I don't mean to take a passive approach. I don't take a passive approach with my clients. Even though time will tell, I don't agree with a wait and see mentality. And that's the mentality a lot of times of traditional medicine. Let's just wait and see what happens because we don't really know what to do with it yet. I disagree. I disagree fully. The treatment goal here is to protect and bolster. Get that. Protect and bolster the immune and inflammatory systems in your body. Um, uh, I believe we should throw everything at it but the kitchen sink. It's that important. And if you know me, I firmly believe that epigenetics lie right squarely at the center of this low energy issue as it relates to viruses, because it relates to the immune system and inflammation. So anyway, I hope that was clear. If it's not, please message me and let's carry on this conversation because this is really critically important to understand. All right, next, let's talk about the third root cause of low energy as I see it. Researchers have found that women who sleep less than 6 hours per night have definite hormone imbalances in their body. And these hormone imbalances caused by lack of sleep appear to be directly related to, guess what? Low energy. But they were also related to poor stress responses and depression. There it is again, low energy, poor stress response, or anxiety and depression. Where did we hear that? We heard that in the Cupid studies that I just mentioned, right? So you're starting to see this similarity. Why are they flocking together? Why is low energy associated with low stress, poor stress response, anxiety? Why is it related with depression? Is it because the low energy is being caused by the mental health issues? I think in the olden days, I think it would easily be blamed on that. But now we're in the 21st century. We're moving forward. Epigenetics is becoming prominent, and we're starting to see that, yes, these people who struggle with depression and these people that struggle with anxiety, guess what? They have methylation issues. They have mitochondria issues. They have genetic inflammatory issues, genetic detoxification issues, and all of these things are interlinked. So it's not as cut in stone as it used to be in saying, oh, you have depression, you're going to have low energy, or you have anxiety, oh, you're going to have low energy. It's not that easy. We have to take it one step further and say, well, but why is this happening? And that's where we are in this field right now with epigenetics. And so that particular study that I just told you about was related to women who get less than 6 hours of sleep per night. Now, I wasn't able to find an exact study that matched this study with women, but there are some studies out there that show that men who get less than 6 hours of sleep per night, they also struggle with health issues. Now, it tends to be cardiovascular and blah, 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 blah. But when you do the research and you look back at those research papers, you see that a lot of that is hormone mediated. So men also, when they don't get enough sleep, they have hormone imbalances, and those hormone imbalances can lead to low energy. They can lead to poor stress responses. They can lead to being more prone to heart attack and stroke and those types of things. So, but the common denominator is that lack of sleep leads to hormone imbalances, and hormone imbalances leads to this low energy and the sequelae of other things that can occur physically and emotionally. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that even though this study didn't necessarily point it out, there's a universal truth to lack of sleep leading to low energy. In fact, did we even really need to have research proof to tell us that? Probably not. I mean, anybody who's gotten less than 6 hours sleep knows that they have low energy. But there it is anyway. Sleep is the foundation of good energy levels and great mood. Now, our last root cause shouldn't surprise anyone at all who's followed me for any length of time, because I harp on this frequently. Gut health plays a critical role in promoting physical health as well as mental health. But for the first time, scientists have identified a correlation between specific gut microbiome patterns or gut bacteria patterns and a condition called fibromyalgia, which is another condition associated with, yes, low energy. Now, according to this study, the severity of low energy, among other symptoms, were directly correlated with the increased presence of certain gut bacteria and an absence of other gut bacteria. In other words, the condition, the technical name is gut dysbiosis, or gut bacteria imbalances. Now, to recap, there are 4 root causes that are rarely, if ever, considered when addressing low energy. In fact, if you want to upset a primary care doc, an OBGYN, an internal medicine guy, walk in and say, the only problem I'm having is low energy. They will run a battery of basic tests like they do with your annual lab every year. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, everything's normal. And if you go back repeatedly with that same complaint of low energy, they're eventually going to say, and I know this from experience because I hear this from 8 out of 10 clients that walk through my door. If you repeatedly bring this problem of low energy up, and you keep going back to your health professional, your well-intentioned health professional, they're going to eventually say, you know what, I think you're depressed and I think you need an antidepressant. And you're going to end up on an antidepressant. Not cool, because there's so much more to low energy. Yes, it is an enigma. No, it is not an official diagnosis. And the traditional medical system, thanks to insurance companies, pigeonholes us into this place, this dark place where we have to have a diagnosis for things. I don't agree with that because we're so much more complex than a diagnosis, aren't we? So much more complex than a label. And yes, we can take a symptom and say, okay, why is that symptom there? Is it because of a mental health reason? Is it because of a genetic reason? Is it because of a viral reason? And we have to look at it more holistically. But if you want to upset your traditional medicine health professional, walk in and say, "Hey, I have low energy," and that's the only problem I have. They're going to scratch their head. They're going to order some lab work. They're going to 8 out of 10 times tell you, "Yeah, everything's normal," and send you on your way. But back to the recap. When addressing low energy, we have to consider epigenetics. We have to consider the presence of viruses in the body. We have to consider lack of sleep, and we have to consider gut bacteria balance. Now let's discuss some practical techniques you can use right now to elevate your energy levels. This first one comes out of a study, which is an interesting study conducted by the Air Force Medical Corps. And what they found was they were looking for a way to combat low energy for veterans who were actively in the field who had worked more than a 12-hour shift. Obviously, they want them to be as alert as possible because they're there for defense and so on and so forth. So they were looking for ways to stimulate them without having to give them something invasive like a medication or supplement or other things like that. So what they found is that stimulation of the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is the longest, largest nerve system in the entire body. It runs head to toe. If you've ever been nauseated, ever vomited, ever had diarrhea, the vagus nerve was involved. If you've ever had heart arrhythmia issues, have felt your heart fluttering, the vagus nerve was involved. If you've ever had breathing issues, the vagus nerve was involved. So the vagus nerve is this, it's the largest nerve, it's the longest nerve in the entire body. Again, it runs head to toe, controls multiple functions throughout the body. And what they found was is stimulating the vagus nerve at the back of the base of the skull actually caused a level of alertness that lasted up to 34 hours, which was kind of crazy. And what they were doing is they were using an electrical stimulation on the outside, a very low electrical stimulation. It wasn't like anything like a TENS unit that just really taps you and stings. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a low level electrical stimulation of the vagus nerve at the base of the skull. And what they found was is that really stimulated alertness and combated low energy. Now that brings us to what solution I'm talking about, because obviously we don't have any of those devices to hook up to the back of our neck and make us more alert. But what can we do that will stimulate the vagus nerve? Now, these are some old techniques that I learned a long time ago that really stimulate the vagus nerve and get us revved up and combat low energy. So let's say you've been working hard all day, you've been sitting at your desk, you've not been moving a lot, and you get that two in the afternoon or that 3 in the afternoon lull, which happens quite frequently to a lot of us who work from home and things like that. So there's one technique you can do where on the center of your breastbone, just curve your fingers, your 4 fingers on your dominant hand, and I don't know if you can hear that. And you just want to tap the middle of your breastbone. You don't want to overdo it. You can really overstimulate yourself by doing that, but give it about 30 seconds and then see how you do. See if that wakes you up. See if that makes you more alert. Wait a minute or two. If it didn't really do the trick, then come back and re-tap. But usually 10, 15 seconds, 30 seconds sometimes will actually really stimulate your vagus nerve system just by tapping briskly on the middle of your breastbone. Now, the other technique here to stimulate the vagus nerve is what I call fire breathing. Now, fire breathing is a yogic breathing technique, and fire breathing is 10 very sharp inhales through the nostrils, and then a very brisk, forceful but short exhale in between. And you can do 2 rounds of that. So 10 inhales in through the nose, and I'm about to do that for you. And then one quick exhale, and then repeat that for 10. Now, I will tell you this. If you're a person that struggles with anxiety, fire breathing probably isn't for you. I will say this about chest tapping. Chest tapping is one of those things you're going to have to use with caution as well. Maybe cut it shorter, maybe do 5 seconds or 10 seconds of chest tapping right on the center of the breastplate on your chest. But fire breathing, if you're one that struggles with anxiety, be really careful with this. And with both of these techniques, stimulating the vagus nerve system, be really careful about using these too late in the day. If it's 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, I've seen fire breathing actually prevent you from being able to go to sleep. Once you go to sleep, you're fine, but it'll interfere with you falling asleep, that latency period. I'll teach you what to do to bring yourself down here in just a minute. I've taught it on other episodes. Be whiskey breathing. So if you're running into that in the evening where you're having a hard time falling asleep, you can bring yourself down with another breathing technique. But here's the fire breathing technique. 10 sharp inhales through the nostrils. And then exhale. And then 10 again. And then exhale. Okay, that's it. Now, you may need to do 3 rounds of that or 4 rounds of that. Generally, I stay pretty well wired this time of day, so I don't want to do too many of those. But if you need to bring yourself down, then you do what we call rectangular breathing or whiskey breathing. And it's an inhale of 8 seconds. That's the long side of the rectangle. Just imagine yourself drawing a rectangle in your mind. Inhale for 8 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. Inhale for 8 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. That completes the cycle. Do 4 cycles of that where you kind of draw the square in your mind. 8 seconds in, 4 seconds out. And that's called whiskey breathing. That'll actually calm you down. If you want to do a balanced breathing where it's just neutral, it doesn't activate you, it doesn't bring you down. And sometimes balanced breathing can be really good to stimulate your vagus nerve as well, but just on a more mild pattern, do what they call 4 square. It's a 4 square breathing, and count for 4 seconds, inhale, count for 4 seconds, exhale, count for 4 seconds, inhale, count for 4 seconds, exhale, and imagine yourself drawing a square. So those are the techniques that you can use to stimulate your vagus nerve. Now, the last technique was really interesting, and it was a study that was done. It was conducted with people who exercise, and what they wanted to do, they've always known, and this goes back 100 years. Scientists have known that listening to music while you exercise actually improves exercise performance, and it improves energy levels while you exercise. But until now, they've really not been able to see why that is. But they were able to conduct neuroimaging, MRI imaging of clients while they exercised, and it was just hand exercise because you can't move much in an MRI. But they were using a hand exercise machine, and they monitored their brain activity while they were listening to music versus not listening to music. And what they found was something really, really interesting, is that the areas of the brain that are associated with improving energy output actually are really lit up when you're listening to music. So how can you use this in your everyday life? Well, again, you're in that afternoon lull. You've been sitting at your desk working hard all day. Here's what I recommend. Get up from your desk and put some earbuds in, or turn some music on your computer, whatever it takes. I have a playlist that I personally listen to before I get on a show like this, so my energy level is up. I use that same playlist if I'm going to be speaking on the stage, and I just call it my pre-talk playlist. And it's really, really upbeat music. Mostly, all modern music, some 80s, some 90s in there, but most of it's today's music. And really listen to that upbeat music, and it jazzes me up. It gets my energy level up. If you've ever been to a Tony Robbins event, you know that he uses music and he uses movement to get your energy level up. But he's also exciting your neurotransmitters and your dopamine by doing that, and your natural endorphins by getting you revved up with music and movement. So think Tony Robbins when you get that afternoon lull. Get up from your desk, turn your music on, whatever that looks like for you. Just make sure it's not classical or something like that, but something you can dance to, something that you can exercise to. Do jumping jacks in place, do push-ups, jog in place, whatever it takes for you to move your body while you're listening to that music. It's going to increase your energy level. All right, that's all I've got for today. It's a long episode, wasn't it? It's longer than I've done in a while. If you're struggling with low energy, or you're a biohacker and simply want to take your biohacking journey to the next level, or maybe you're curious about your inflammatory genes and how that's increasing your risk for other challenges like low energy, maybe it's time to learn about how epigenetic profiling could be the answer. I've created a 5-day boot camp called the Gene Hack Boot Camp. And by the end of that 5 days, you'll have a keen understanding of exactly where you need to focus in your wellness journey, or your health recovery journey, or your biohacking journey, to get to where you want to get fully optimized. You'll learn about the exact genes you need to have tested in order to address any hangups you have. And you'll learn some of my favorite genetic modifying natural treatments. Also, you can begin to feel better, feel optimized, and ultimately so you can live the way you want to live. But right now we're running a promotional special, and the boot camp is free. This is not a false scarcity or anything. I really can't promise how long it's going to be that way. We're testing it right now. It may be that way forever. I'll be completely honest with you, but it may not be. I've got on my vision board, on my planning, we're going to be increasing the price back up on that, and it's no longer going to be free. But right now it's free. So you can get an amazing deal by just, being able to attend for free. Go to drbriangBrown.com/gene hack, and you'll be able to register there and take advantage of that free offer. Again, don't know how long it's going to last, but right now it's free. We'd love to see you there. So go to drbriangBrown.com/gene hack/bootcamp and register. Tune in next Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time for our next In the Zone segment, where I'll be sharing the latest research and my insights about that research as it relates to optimizing your genes, optimizing your physical performance, optimizing your emotional wellness, and just your overall biohacking journey, whatever that looks like for you. Most informed, most trusted, and most grateful you spent this time with us today. Until next time, stay in the zone. I'm Dr. Brian Brown.